This is the Scale Smarter podcast. On this show, we interview founders, CEOs, and industry leaders to uncover their stories. You'll hear real insights and business strategies from those who have been in the trenches themselves. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Well, welcome back to the Scale Smarter podcast. Really excited to have on Eddie DeCurits today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Shush. Eddie, welcome.
Hi, man. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for hopping on today. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
It's a pleasure being here.
Well, will you kind of dive in and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are today, and I'm eager to hear about Shush.
Wow, it's a long road. Over 30 years experience in telecommunications. I'm going to age myself, but I started in paging, the little pagers. I kind of got into this industry in a really weird way, right? It wasn't something I was looking to do, let's say. I don't know what I was in. You could say I was in the music industry, the nightclub business. That's what I did. And then I moved to LA and couldn't find a job. And a friend of mine had a friend who had almost like like an electronics store that sold like cell phones and early day cell phones and pagers. And I went to work for them when I first moved out to LA, didn't have a job, and I went to work for them and it kind of was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. It's technology and all that. And then I ended up working for the company that provided the service. It was a company called PageNet. Back in the day, if you've seen there's been a couple of movies back in the 80s with like Steven Seagal, and they would have a pager and it said PageNet on it, right? So I went to work for that company. And I worked with them out in LA, and I spent some time out in LA, and I wanted to go back to New York. And they moved me back to New York, and I worked in the New York location because they were big. At the time, they would have been like, what AT&T was today. Everybody knew them, right? That was the communication mode we were in, right? Paging. Cell phones were the infancy of the industry. $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 phone bills were normal. Only the uber wealthy could afford them, right? You paid per minute and all that. So I worked for them for about 7 years, right? And then they moved me down to Texas from New York. I got more and more involved on the technology side. And then, right before I moved on to a company that got me to live in Austria, I ended up working for a gentleman by the name of John Kluge's company called Metro Media International. And they had a bunch of international properties. I started getting more involved in cellular, but I'll never forget, right when I took that job, I was talking to a consultant. I was still living in Texas. I was about to I was waiting on the offer and all that. And this guy told me about cellular and what they were doing in Europe and SMS messaging and how it was going to replace paging and all this kind of crazy stuff. And, you drank the Kool-Aid and you're like, nothing's going to change paging. It's always going to be here and so on. He was right. This guy was right on. I knew what he was talking about. And so I lived in Europe for about a year, started really learning the cellular business, came back, and then really got involved on messaging and building like mobile networks, the original 18 when AT&T first came about. I worked with a number of their affiliates, right? They eventually acquired, of course, and gave them that nationwide footprint. And I've been involved in different parts of the wireless industry for, like I said, for over 30 years. So heavily in messaging, there's a lot of the stuff that I have done that is still being used. I helped, there was like 5 or 6 guys running around the same time, trying to figure out how to make SMS work, like between, today, like AT&T and T-Mobile, you just text, right? It's just work, right? Well, it didn't work back then. Everybody was an island unto themselves. And there were about 5 of us in the industry, and we're all friends today, and we all kind of worked. This was back in like 1999, and we figured out how to make it work between 2 different networks. I like to say I helped invent it, but there's a lot of credit to go around. There's a lot of people who worked who, were all doing the same thing at the same time. I've been involved in messaging for most of my career. If you had to like narrow it down to one thing, most of my career was messaging. And then as the world kind of shifted and we stopped moving into more IP based messaging like iMessage and RCS, which is Google's answer, and now the inner working. What ended up happening was I became a regional CEO for a mobile security, mobile identity company. And since I've been involved with, and I was responsible for the Americas, and I was responsible for Asia Pacific, and I'm talking to these people, these mobile network operators out there, and we're trying to buy this information from them so we can better secure an individual when they're logging in from their banking app or from their financial institution, be it like crypto or whatever. You're trying to buy this data and you're talking to these mobile operators, and these mobile operators are all saying the same thing to you. I don't know how to expose that data. I have no idea how to do this. I have no money because I've spent billions, if not $1 trillion on 5G. And I always laugh. There was nothing 4G could have done that 5G is doing, right? And they're all saying the same thing. And I kept saying, there's a big gaping hole in this industry. We don't have a demand problem, right? So, remember, it's Econ 101, right? I mean, I don't even think it's Econ 101. I think it's high school, macro and macroeconomics class, right? It was like supply and demand, right? You have all this demand, you have no supply, right? So you have the 1,000 mobile network operators out there, 33 have something. Well, what about the 967 that have nothing, right? Or can't do anything, right? You got very sophisticated operators like an AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, et cetera. And they got these unsophisticated, and I'm not using that in a disparaging way, that they're unsophisticated. No, they just don't know how to do it. They don't have the people, the bandwidth, the understanding of what is involved to supply network attributes. Because you're asking a mobile network operator to expose CPNI data, which is customer network, personal information. I mean, it's like not the phone number, it's everything about that individual for the first time in their lives, outside the four walls of the mobile network operator, right? So you're asking them to do this and they have no idea. So I went back to my group CEO and I said, we got a huge hole here. Again, we don't have a supply problem. We don't have a demand problem. We have a supply problem. We have to fix this supply. They didn't have any much interest in it. And I left the company and I was sitting there. It was December of 2023. And I'm sitting right here in my office trying to figure out, what to do next. I'm like, I'm getting too old to go find another job. I mean, I was the CEO. I was senior vice president. I held senior executive level positions at some, substantially large companies. Do I want to do this again? Right? Is this something I want to do? So I sat down and wrote a thesis, right? First time. And I've done other startups, don't get me wrong, that have failed spectacularly, like every other startup guy out there, right? Oh, yeah, it's a great idea. No, it was a great idea in my head, right? Or it was a great idea in my echo chamber, right? But it wasn't a great idea from a business standpoint, right? I thought it was. It's like, hey, I want to open up a restaurant with only the food I like, right? And then you go, well,
Right.
I'm like, I don't know why it failed, right? Um, so I sat down, I wrote a thesis, right? And I said, this is if I was to do this, this is what this company needs to do, what this company needs to be, what this company, the culture, everything. I just like really sat there from like the 15th of December through Christmas. And then once it was done, I have been very blessed in my career to have worked with some of the smartest, trend-setting leaders in this space, right? I mean, guys who invented things that people today take advantage of. Like, not take advantage of, but like don't even realize it. But these are the guys and gals that I've been around my whole career that I've been very, very lucky to had the pleasure of knowing and respecting and actually working with, right? Especially if you're in wireless and you hear a name and it's like, yeah, that was my boss, or yeah, that's where I learned this from. And one of those individuals happens to be John Donovan. John Donovan was the former CEO of AT&T, like the whole thing. He started as CTO. They moved him up to president and COO, and then became the CEO when Randall moved up to executive chairman, Randall Stevenson. And everybody goes, how well do you know John Donovan? I go, well enough the fact that he used to prove my expense reports. That's how well I know him. And I shot him an email. Well, no, I shot him a LinkedIn message. And he goes, here's my email, send me an email. I send him an email and said, I just need some time. I want to run something by you and get your opinion. I mean, the guy ran AT&T, right? And I sat and gave me an hour of his time. This guy sits on the board of Lockheed Martin, okay, and like Palo Alto Networks and these big companies. I mean, this is a no joke guy, right? And I sat with him it gave me an hour, which you can't pay for that, right? He
Right.
gave me an hour, and
So cool.
I ran through my thesis with him, and he literally asked me a ton of questions. Said, "What about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this?" And I think the first time of ever doing, with the history of doing startups here and there and in between roles, and I go that. I had all the answers. Like I sat there and I was like, well, you know, because of this, you do this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, what about this? And you have all these answers. And you felt comfortable answering those questions. Like I wasn't taken back. I had the answers. And I was like, well, this is the first time I had an answer for everything, right? And he said to me at the end of the call, I go, so what do you think? And he goes, go raise $40 million and own this space because you have hit on something. This is good. This is really good. The really good idea to really good execute on it, and you're going to do very, very well.
Wow.
Right. So I took that as my starting gun, right? Start, right? Run, like now go full speed ahead. My wife, for the first time in all my wacky ideas, turned around and said, you got to do this, right? Steve never said that in my, almost 30 years of marriage. Never, always like, go get a job. That's what I was like, go get a job. You stop with these crazy ideas.
That's funny.
So I called my partner up. And I said, I have this idea. Here's the thesis. Here's what I want to do. Do you want to come along for this crazy ride? And he went, yeah. And we incorporated on February 2nd, 2024. Just earlier than that, I was talking to a number of operators who signed POC agreements with me, like with nothing. I had an idea, and a piece of paper. That's it. And they believed in me enough that they signed POC agreements with me. So that gets me started. And yeah, we've been going gangbusters ever since. I was at Mobile World Congress. I mean, I went on miles and at a $75 a night, room in some apartment in Barcelona. And, made an announcement at Mobile World Congress, built my website on my cell phone because they accidentally released the interview early and I didn't even have a website for the company. And it's like all those like little stories, right? And we just, like I said, we ended up hiring the best guy in the industry to be the chief product officer. That was the deal. We literally have been blessed with a team of people that we had the opportunity to get on board, right? Our chief product officer ran this product and solution from its inception to its execution and then ran it for a number of years at T-Mobile USA. There is nobody who knows more about this stuff or has forgotten more about this as a product for network authentication at a mobile network operator than John Morrow, my chief product officer. And then, of course, we got an amazing CTO and network guy. And we raised money in 45 days total. Like we did a seed round of over $3 million. We were oversubscribed in 45 days, which was,
Wow.
and we're talking 2024, right? When it was, you couldn't rob a bank to get money. All right.
Right.
It was like nobody was putting up that kind of money. Right. And we did it in 45 days and we delivered not an MVP, we delivered a GA product. That's the team I'm blessed to have. And I'm the people I'm blessed to work with. So, yeah. So, it's crazy. You sit there and you got to pinch yourself sometimes and say, is this real?
No
Because we're
kidding.
running it as a business, right? We're not running it like, five guys in a garage, right? We're running it like a real business, like, where we do financials and, we have expense reports and, this is a business because, we're all seasoned, seasoned leadership roles, right? We all done this. Now, don't get me wrong. We're very, very cash sensitive. Like, we manage our money and we don't spend just to spend money. But yeah, no, and I look at the AI guys. This one's valued at $7 trillion. It's like, here's $50 billion, and you're hoping that something's going to come out of it, right? And we're not that. We're a real business, and we provide an unbelievable solution to the mobile network operators to allow them to expose their CP&I data to third parties for the prevention of fraud, right? Think about that. So no more logging into your bank and then getting a 6-digit code, right? They're already losing money. We helped invent that. We could see the handwriting on the wall. It's not secure. There's nothing stopping Bree from going to the guy yelling across the street his 6-digit code, right? There's nothing stopping that. SIM swap, right? SIM swap is the largest. I think right now SIM swap probably takes the cake for the most money ever stolen in a single bound. When they robbed, they did 3 SIM swaps and robbed, $500 billion, right? Well, I'm sorry, 500 million, excuse me. I sometimes get my M's and my B's
Totally
confused,
fine.
right? Right.
That's
So
crazy.
they, 500, $500 million, like in an hour, I mean,
Wow.
just on SIM swap. But it's not that. It's the lady who lost her entire life savings and couldn't
Yeah.
pay a mortgage and almost got a house foreclosed on because someone didn't check to see if there was a SIM swap done at 3 o'clock in the morning. Right.
Mm,
So that's what we're protecting. We're protecting that woman from New Jersey. Right.
very
And we're
cool.
working with mobile network operators all over the world to deliver a solution that's best in class. There is nobody, there is not Ericsson, Nokia, or any of these companies that are out there that claim they have a solution that can compete with what we created. And our product is named Sherlock. Right, the world is moving down the path along with the GSMA on a standards base of APIs called Chimera. The problem is no brand or enterprise has built SDK that supports those APIs. They will, don't get me wrong, they will, but they don't today. So you got to be able to. I was telling, it's funny. We signed a large contract with a very large mobile operator that we'll be announcing soon, and I was trying to explain to him what he was buying, right? And I used. I'm not a huge car guy, but I like cars, right? And I said, well, I'm going to explain to you in the car, like using it as a car analogy. What is the best power plant to fit the average person's needs? Is it electric? No, because there's not enough charging places. There's still range anxiety and all that. Is it gas, internal combustion? There's gas stations everywhere, but, gas gets more expensive. You may have reasons that you don't want in a gas car and stuff, but the best is a hybrid, right? So you get the best of both worlds, right? You get electric, when you need it, or you get great gas mileage, etc. But even better than the regular hybrid is a plug-in hybrid, which is the best of the best. So you get a hybrid for gas mileage, you get gas for the convenience, and you get electric, right? And for, let's say, 50, 60, 70, 80 miles, right? And in some of these Chinese manufacturers, their cars have 12, 700 mile ranges on their hybrid solution. That's what you're buying. You're buying that. You're getting the best of all worlds. You're getting the APIs that are currently being consumed, and it's a multi-billion-dollar a year business. You're getting all those, plus you're getting all the Chimera stuff, plus it works seamlessly together. And then we're the only platform in the world that supports a solution called TS43 EAPA AKA, right? Which is the holy grail of network authentication. We were the first company to announce that we fully supported it. We are the only platform in the world that currently supports it right today out of the box. And that is the future. And what that allows for authentication from any network, from any browser or application. So if there is a SIM card somewhere in that communication flow, like over the air fiber, they call fixed wireless access, right? You get like the T-Mobile box you can buy, and get T-Mobile internet. That's fixed wireless access. Something like that from a satellite to that. So Starlink to that, to mobile phone, to computer, to browser, everything will be authenticated against that SIM card. It is truly the holy grail of authentication. And we're currently the only company right now that supports the standard the way the standards are written. Now, some people have maybe a different solution, but the way it's supposed to work, I believe, and I'm pretty confident I can say this, we're the only company that's currently supporting it globally,
Very
right?
cool. Yeah.
And we announced it, but again, it's not me. You hear little people talking, whispering in some coffee clutch, and you go, wait a minute, they're talking about that, and then I call up my technology group and say, hey guys, what about this? And then you got one guy in the back of the room going, oh, we could do that, and then I'm like, all right, you got 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, they're like, we're done. Yeah, we fully support it. I'm like blown away, but you only get that from having a team of professionals, brilliant, think outside the box. I mean, like I said, we are truly blessed with the team that we had the opportunity to pull together from hugely different backgrounds, right? And you can't like you can't put money again. Another thing you can't put money on, right? But we're also quick to, if you're not right for the team, to cut bait and move on, right? Where it's very, very important, especially in this time. I think that's probably my number one job I have, is to make sure we have the right people in the right roles now more than ever. Like, there is no opportunity to bring someone through the learning process. There is no opportunity for that because we're hitting the ground running. We're trying to be successful. We have investors, right? We're trying to deliver a solution to these mobile network operators who everything is hurry up and wait, right? So you can't nurture. Maybe a year, 2, 3, 4 years from now, I went from 2 employees to 26 employees in 18 months,
Wow. And
right?
just out of curiosity, what did you do to scale that big, that quick?
Run screaming into the night. No, it comes down to making sure you have the right people in the right roles and you trust them, right? So most of them sit in technology, of course, right? And my chief technology officer is very, very good at finding the right people for those roles, right? So he went out and found them. So we were like, again, we were able to scale very, very quickly with, again, but if they, again, we can't nurture them. We can't, not that we don't want to, it's just we don't have the luxury of doing that. So if they're not going to fit both culturally, personally, knowledge based wise, I mean, we look at everything, right? We look at the whole gamut. Like, sometimes you hear of companies that maybe had toxic employees, but they were so valuable to the company, they couldn't let them go. No, we we won't tolerate that. You have to be able to fit in both culturally and personally. Everybody's friends. Everybody jokes around. Everybody wants to work with each other to be successful, if you know what I mean. And I know this sounds kind of cliche, clicky and all that. And it's like, oh yeah, we're all big family. We're not a family. I have a family. My best friend's my dog, but I have a family where we're colleagues and we all respect each other. I
Yeah.
find myself down to writing an email, when I say, and you'll never see me say my team, right? It's not my team. I say the team here or our team,
Yeah.
right? The team, Shush team will do this because we're all working together. But it's not mine. It's not I. I'm not the grunt. I may be the chief executive, and the final decisions come down to me sometimes, right? But it's not. It's not a democracy, and it's not a monarchy. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. How I
I
will
gotcha.
make that decision. I will
I
say,
gotcha. Yeah.
because it is my vision, right? That's the fact. It is my vision,
Yeah.
and I know what I want to do to be successful. But it doesn't stop me from reaching out to my chief product officer and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Or
Yeah.
my technology officer and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Or my partner, my CFO, and say, "What do you think of this?" I It's important to me to get that feedback because you can't. I'm not always right. I try to be, but I'm not always. So
Yeah.
yeah, but that's how we scaled, by having the right people, having the
I
right
love that.
people, in those right
Yeah.
roles.
I love that. And it's important to all get along, if you will, right? That's what really helps success. I mean, if you're in a
Mhm.
team with somebody and you're not on the same page, things you button heads, things aren't going smoothly.
Yeah,
But
and I
if
gotta
you're all
say,
on
I
the
got
same page and go ahead.
well, no, but you have to see. You got to be real careful because you don't want to be in an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for companies like that. I worked for an amazing
Yeah.
CEO, but his entire senior management team was an echo chamber,
Yeah.
right? No one was willing to stand up and say this is a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have people that are willing to stand up and say this is a bad idea. But
Nice.
you better be able to defend your position, right? Don't just tell me it's a bad idea because you don't like it or it's too much work. Tell me it's
Right.
a bad idea because it's not going to work. But you know what I mean? I'm prepared to be challenged, and then we come to a not a consensus. We'll come to a place where we need to make a decision.
Yeah.
But the good news is we're still small enough that we can pivot if we need to, and and we've been blessed enough that we haven't made the crazy mistakes, right? You know,
That's great.
so trust me. My first logo was an emoji from Apple, right? That was my first logo, right? Until someone said this was horrible. And I was like, why? And then, we have a new one, right? So I can change.
And that's great that you're humble enough to change and listen to people and
Mhm.
take the insight. Because
Yeah,
people that don't do that, they learn the hard way. But
they do.
anyways, what's the process of somebody that's wanting to obtain your service? So do you guys just stick to bigger networks, or do you guys sell to individual? Like if I wanted Shush, if I wanted
Yes.
to use that as
Mhm.
an authenticator, what
Yeah.
would that process
So
kind of look like?
And that's the beauty of what we do. So we're only focused on the mobile network operator. And then I don't care. I have customers that have 5,000 subscribers. And then I have customers that have millions and millions of subscribers, right? So it doesn't matter the size of the mobile network operator. We work with everybody, right? I'm not saying, oh, I'll only work with you if you're the size of T-Mobile, right? No, I don't say that. I work with everybody. But we only sell to them because they need that infrastructure or software or whatever you want to call it. But they need our services, and our platform is named Sherlock. They need our services to allow them to expose this data. The good news is we have worked on both sides of the fence, so we know who's purchasing that information. So we actually bring them together in that relationship, so it becomes a total end-to-end service offering. So we like to tell these guys, you make money from day one, right? You launch in less than 90 days and you can make money from day one because we're bringing these big brands or these big, what's called an aggregator. So let's say you're on Bank of America and Bank of America uses XYZ aggregator, and you just so happen to be on one of my carriers service provider, right? Bank of America will the aggregator XYZ will tell Bank of America that I don't want to say it was, let's say I happen to have AT&T as a customer. AT&T is available with all these data attributes, right? So now when you log into your Bank of America account, no more, 6-digit code. It will just, you put your login, your password, and then it uses the network to verify that it's truly you and it's truly your cell phone accessing that mobile app at that time in this specific location. And no, there wasn't a SIM swap done in the last, 24 hours. And yes, you're capable of doing these features and services all in milliseconds, and
Yeah.
it's secure.
Yeah.
Like you can't give that away, right? You can't give that away. So you can't, it gives the bank the opportunity. It gives the bank the opportunity that if there is something in this information flow that doesn't look right, the opportunity to take it to another level. Like with OTP, there is no other opportunity. They send you a 6-digit code, you type in the 6-digit code, they got to assume it's you, right?
Yeah.
This, if nothing's matching and nothing's right, right? It gives the bank to say, hey, maybe I don't want to do this transaction. Maybe this transaction does look fishy because Brae's information on this specific data point doesn't match what we were expecting, right? So the level of fraud protection grows and then the bank, you know, not allowing something to happen, or maybe calling you up and saying, are you doing this transaction? Saves them tens of thousands of dollars worth of, of bad actors, right? Here's a great example. In Europe, one of the biggest, and in some other countries, but we'll just use like the UK in particular. I'll call you up on the phone and say, hey, this is Eddie. I'm from, the Bank of England. I'm going to send you a 6-digit code. Can you tell me if it's, if you get it? And so it's what's called in call state. Well, I can know from the network if you're in a call. The network will tell me that you're in a phone call. And it will also tell me if the call is inbound or outbound. So if you made the call or you received the call. So let's say I'm the Bank of England and you want to do, I pretended I was you. I convinced you to log into your Bank of England account, and there's probably no Bank of England. I know the Bank of England is their central bank, but let's say there's an app and I want you to wire me 10,000. You need to wire out $10,000 or whatever the situation may be. As the bank, I could say, "Oh, wait, he's in a call. We don't call our employees. We don't call our customers, right? This may be fraud. Let's stop this transaction and say." This transaction cannot be approved at this time. Please come into your local branch, right? Yes. Was it a little inconvenient for you? But just think how inconvenient would it have been if you moved $5,000 out of your bank. And then you had to go through filing the police report, doing all these steps, all to, so that's what this platform will provide to both the demand, the banks, the fintechs, the social media sites, and the and the mobile network operators, which, by the way, can then monetize that data. And the banks and fintechs and social media sites and all these guys will, pay for it because they're seeing there's a massive value there. Instead of sending you a 6-digit code that they pay that pay tens of cents on, that they're getting no value from. Now
Yeah.
they're getting actual value. And you got the regulators involved, right? So more and more, you're seeing more and more regulators telling these mobile network operators and these fintechs and social media sites, gambling sites, et cetera, that you have to start putting in more protection around fraud. TikTok, for an example, has an age verification problem, right? I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who uses TikTok from a computer, right? Well, where are you getting the data from? Well, you're going to only be able to get it from, well, you have to cross the mobile network operator to get that data. Maybe they have it and they could sell it. Maybe they don't. And they go to an outside database, right? But the ability to do that is huge because they're being regulated. The United States government is now regulating mobile operators to offer SIM swap protection, right? Well, when there's a regulation, then you need the technology, the technology that allows the carriers or the mobile network operators to expose that data. And there's a need.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Thank you for diving in on that. I've learned a lot today. There's a lot more to it than I ever even thought. So
Yeah,
thank you
there's a lot.
for educating me. What do you guys do what does retention look like for you guys?
Well, that's a good question, right? So since we sit in the mobile network operators, right, we sit within their trusted domain, right? Because you don't want to be in their core, or you want to be somewhere on the periphery. Once you're in, right? And in my career, no matter if it was an SMSC, messaging server, or it was a switch, you tend not to get ripped out because it's very complicated, right? It's very good. So you won't lose, you're not losing business. Talk to me in 2 or 3 years from now, because remember, this is a new service. I mean, it's been around in other like life cycles, right? Early a number of years ago, we had what was called one API and all these different things. So there's been iterations of it, but this is the first time the industry is kind of really focused on network authentication APIs, network as a service APIs. You got some of the big OEMs, right? So in a couple of years, once the sheen wears off, ask me about retention.
Yeah.
Let's see it could be ripping out my competitors or even ripping me out. I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now, but right now we're not seeing any of that.
Okay. Cool. And How we talked a little bit about this before the call. How has AI affected you guys thus far?
So I again, this goes back to being kind of blessed, right? So I was blessed enough to work for a company called LivePerson that were at the time in 2019 the leaders in the AI space. And it was predictive AI or intent-based AI, not generative, right? Generative is new. And we had the best AI platform in the world, hands down, right? Because we had 18 years of conversational data, right? Because company was over 18 years old. We had 18 years of conversational data. That was our data set, right? So we knew intent versus settlement versus, so we were way ahead of everybody, miles ahead away from everybody. And I had a CEO who was in, who, was, you guys are going to be AI experts. And again, blessed enough to have people that work there, a guy by the name of Alex Finelli, who, who developed Alexa, right? Alan Gilchrist, who came up with Amazon's recommendation engine, right? I mean, when I got the job there, my wife was like, "We're never getting an Alexa in the house." And Alex was like, "No, no, no, it doesn't listen." And then a week later, the news report came out and said Alexa was listening. And, and I was showing Alex, but you got guys like Alex Finelli, who, who's now I think he's at Arm running their entire AI and machine learning division. I think that's what he's doing. I don't quote me on that. But he did it at Google, right? I guess which became Gemini, right? And then went over to Arm and then Alan Gilchrist. But these are the types of people that work there. And Rob Lacasio, who's the CEO, was driven. Guys, you are going to learn this. And I'll never forget, we had, training, and it was like going back to college. It really was. It was 3 days a week. We had lab, right? We had homework that we had to do. And I was blessed enough to be one of the early executives in the company to go through the program. And it was great. It was fantastic. And, I came out of there, at the time, let's say an expert in, well, maybe not an expert, but above average individual on, at least intent-based AI. Generative AI took it to the next level. That whole, I know it's a long story to get to where I'm getting to, but you'll understand why. Everything we do or every tool that we use internally is all based on some form of AI. We try to use AI as much as possible to handle our daily tasks. It allows it to frees us up, right? I mean, instead of support us and free us up. It allows, quickness getting, from code being developed and tested and stuff like that. So we tend to we're using more. My CFO and my co-partner worked with me at LivePerson. Again, a big AI proponent. Like we love it. We're all for it. The challenge that we have though is our data is very, very proprietary. It's specific for that mobile network operator, let's say, right? So using it to change a data set, using it to train a data set is not allowed. We can't use their data, right? But we can see trends and stuff like that with the aggregate of the data, and we can use that kind of stuff. But a lot of the stuff that we plan to use on the AI is more going to be internal, right? Utilizing the data that we have for internal processes. But if I can, use AI to help move this company forward, we definitely will. We'll take that approach before we throw heads at it or bodies at it, right?
You bet.
Because it just, I mean, how many times, you go into like, or the Gronk and ChatGPT and Perplexity and all that and say, rewrite this email, just it makes your life easier,
Oh,
right?
100%, 100%. I think that's the greatest part, especially implementing AI into your business. It's just you're essentially doing the exact same thing of hiring somebody, but it will actually be done right, and it'll actually
Hmm.
be done like that without adding more headcount to
Yeah.
your
But
team, right?
what I think it does is it allows, like, I still won't trust AI over a human, right?
Right.
Um, because you can tell. right? You can tell if something's written by
Yeah.
AI, or you can tell if they just make things up. What is it called? Hallucinating, right? So I think, allowing you to review the data or review the output
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
modify it takes, there is nothing worse. I don't know about you, but like with me, there is nothing worse at looking at that cursor blinking on a white piece of paper. Nothing worse. And it's like, where do I start? Right.
Yeah.
But being able to go into, a chat GPT, a Gronk, or a Perplexity, or whomever, and say, I got an idea. Give me the, and you just start typing what's in your brain, right?
Yeah.
And it needs to show butterflies, and and then you got to calculate the speed of light, and you just start jotting down tons of things that's like jumbled in this gray matter of yours, right? You put it on a piece of paper, and then you hit return, and it then takes it and formulates it and puts it into a format that you sit there and you go, oh, okay. All right, I see that. Okay. And then you take that and kind of copy it into your document. Now you don't have a blank cursor sitting in the corner. You got 10 pages of text.
Yeah.
And then you
It's
can go through
amazing.
those 10 pages of text and say, all right, that's BS. Highlight, control X, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of it, cut it out, like delete, right? Delete that. All right, move that up. Oh no, that's just completely wrong. They got it flipped around, and you go and you fix these things. And then something that would have taken you maybe days or weeks to write takes an hour.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now I got, 7 hours more of my day back,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
No, it's a big time saver. It truly is amazing. It goes back to what you were saying though. It definitely isn't perfect. I've caught it
Hmm.
multiple times where it's like, that's not right. Or I'll ask ChatGPT a question before I buy like a subscription to something.
Hmm.
I'll say, well, is this included in this subscription? It says yes. I buy the subscription and it's not included. I'm like, oh my heck. It's
Hmm.
things like that. That was just an example. But no, will it get to that point? I'm sure it will eventually,
Hmm.
but it's still just so new.
But how much firepower do they have to throw at it to make it get to that point, right?
Yeah. I know.
I
It's
mean, now we're
interesting.
talking Google buying, nuclear power plants to
Yeah.
power these data centers. I mean, that's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
We complain about electric cars because we don't have the grid infrastructure to support them. That they're putting data centers in. That if you thought the electric car was tough, wait until you got to power these data centers. I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of working at VeriSign, right? VeriSign runs .com and .net. So they built this new data center, right? A brand new data center. It's in Herndon, Virginia. It's a huge data center. That's where the J server sits, and the J server is the internet. Okay, that's the dot. That is com.net. That's in Virginia. Now, you talk to these people and you hear these stories. Okay, we got fiber coming in on one side of the building, fiber coming in on the other side of the building to avoid Jim with the backhoe on a Tuesday digging it up, right? They have this infrastructure in place to keep this data center running because I don't know what it is today, but at the time they committed when they won it from the ICANN and from the Department of Justice, 100% uptime, which is impossible. Everybody goes 5 nines, and we're talking 100% uptime. Never have an outage ever. So they have to throw all this stuff at it. But I'll never forget they had 17 18-wheeler diesel generators,
Wow.
right? Running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they didn't trust the power coming in, like 4 different power companies delivering power to battery backup, all this stuff into that building. They didn't trust them until they ran all those tests. They ran 17 18-wheelers of diesel generators 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for weeks. I don't know the
Jeez.
exact number, but it was weeks, right? It was so because, that was the internet. And I'll never forget the head of the guy who ran, the chief security officer, was telling the story where the Herndon police, I think it was, the Prince Edwards police, whatever, local police department came over and they said, you got to turn those off. The neighbors are complaining. You can't run this at, 2 o'clock in the morning. Imagine what 18 wheelers, 17, 18 wheelers sound like, diesel generators running, right? 2 o'clock in the morning. And he goes, yeah, I gave them a phone number, told them to call the phone number. And it was Andrew Card, the former chief of staff for George Bush Jr., right? And the guy apologized, right? Because he didn't realize that was the internet was being ran from that building, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Level 3 Department of Defense. I don't know. I think it's called level 3 Department of Defense security. I mean, third party. I mean, it was like super secure, super. I wasn't allowed in the building unless I was escorted to like the bathroom. Because that's how secure. But it had to be up. Now you're buying nuclear power plants to run a data center.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the world has changed, right?
Yeah.
You can't get
It's
nuclear
crazy.
power plants to run a neighborhood. Now you get nuclear power plants just to power a data center
Yeah.
because you need all that power, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Thank you for sharing that story. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's funny. Huh.
I actually walked over to the server and touched it. And there's a picture of me touching it. And everybody goes, where were you touching that bank of Dell's servers? Well, that's the internet. That's the .j server. I think it's called .j, right? That's a .j server. That
Yeah.
is .com.
Well, it's a cool
Right.
experience. Yeah.
Well, you remember, I don't know, you're probably too young to remember this, but there used to be a commercial for Sun Microsystems. We are the and .com. Because at the time, VeriSign was all Sun servers. They were all the entire internet for VeriSign ran on Sun. And then when VeriSign moved off Sun, they put Sun out of business. Well, there was other reasons, but that was the catalyst. That was the thing that really over, right? Your
Yeah.
biggest customer go away. Terabyte switches, right? A terabyte switch never existed until VeriSign had Cisco develop one. Now you just go to Best Buy and buy one.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that. You can go to Best Buy and buy a terabyte switch. They never existed before until VeriSign had Cisco build one for them. Yeah, it's crazy. The
It is
world
crazy.
has come a long way
Yeah.
in my year.
It's crazy. It really is. I can't think too deep on it because it's overwhelming for me. But
Think about it this way.
It's cool.
I went to work for VeriSign in November 2021. Oh, I'm sorry. In November 2001. 25 years ago, I went to work for VeriSign. Look how far we have come in just 25 years.
Yep.
My children don't understand, like how we lived without an iPad or an iPhone or even a pager, right? Or they just go on the internet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Well, thank you for diving into that. Kind of wrap this up. We're running a little short on time. 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
So, one, what's been frustrating for you guys right now, or I guess where do you feel like you're leaving money on the table? And then 2, what are some goals that you'd like to accomplish within the next 6 to 12 months?
Okay, so they both tie into each other. Our goal and our issues.
Mhm.
I think our biggest issue is orders to cash. And what I mean by orders to cash, we signed a contract. Now you have to launch because we're all about, I'm going to take that risk with you. We're so confident about this business and we're bringing demand to the table for you to make money, right? From day one, sign the contract, launch the service, make some money. When you make money, we make money. That's the easiest business model I could ever think of, right? When you make money, we make money. If you're successful, we're successful. You're not successful, you have no costs, no risks. The days of spending tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on network equipment are over. That's how I look at it. So you make money, we make money, life's grand, right? The challenge you have is, okay, I'll sign the contract. And then, all I ever ask is a little bit of time. If you can't give me that little bit of time, then I'm sitting there not making any money, doing all this work, did all this work or the pre-work or whatever, and we're not making money. So the orders to cash has been, I think, surprisingly longer than I would have assumed, right? You would have thought they would want to make money as soon as possible. which then goes to where do I see myself in 6 months? Well, that is alleviating themselves because carriers are launching now. More of my customers are ready to turn the service up, and we negotiated better terms on the deal, et cetera, to get them to move a lot faster. And then is now the revenue. So where do I see myself 3, 6, 8, 12, 24 months? Is the revenue is flowing and we're breaking even. I want to get to break even as soon as possible, right? That's a goal. That's a massive goal for us. It doesn't take us a lot to break even because we're trying to keep the headcount to the right size, right? We want to make sure we're right sized and we're not overly hiring people just to have them. Utilizing AI to take some of that burden away from the team and allow more automation happen within the organization to really help us control our costs, right? So we can get to break even a lot faster. And then eventually, then it's EBITDA positive and then it's, cash flow positive. Those are the goals, right? But I think the most surprising thing was orders to cash. I think that really shocked me more than even when I talked to my investors. They said, "What do you think? What do you think was the most surprising thing that didn't happen?" And I'm like, revenue. Orders to cash. It's coming in. Yeah, we're fine. Things are great, but I would have assumed it would have happened a lot faster than it did.
Well, that's great. Thank you for touching on that. Well, Eddie, I love your energy. I love what you're doing with Shush, and I'm really
Thank you.
excited to follow alongside and
Yeah.
see the success that you guys are currently achieving, but will achieve in the future as well.
Couldn't
Before
do it
we,
without my team. Could not do it without my team.
right,
This is not me. I'm
yeah.
just, I'm the pretty face.
Well, that's a humble man right there. If somebody's wanting to reach out to you or learn more about Shush, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn guy. I'm always on it. Or you can go to www.shush, SHUSH.pw and get all the information. You can reach out to us there and, we'll be in touch.
Well, Eddie, thank you again so much for hopping on, and I look forward to the future for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.